Hello there, everybody, and welcome to New Plaza's Classic Film Talkback. I'm Norma Levy, president of New Plaza. We're a nonprofit showing independent foreign films and offering educational programs on classic cinema. In anticipation of Christmas, our curator, Gary Palmucci, has chosen an unusual 1944 noir film starring Deanna Durbin and Gene Kelly, based on a novel by W. Somerset Maugham. It's called Christmas Holiday and is different, very different from your usual holiday fare. Gary will be joined in this talkback by his longtime friend, the film historian, Max Alvarez. So I hope you enjoy this talkback, and Gary, please take it away.
Well, happy holidays, everyone. In our discussions about a holiday-related movie, we considered several well-known chestnuts. It's a Wonderful Life, the 1951 Christmas Carol, Miracle on 34th Street. I think someone even mentioned Love Actually. But it seemed to me the right moment to track down a film that I've long been wanting to see by a director who always needs to be better known, which, courtesy of YouTube, brought us to Robert Siodmak's Christmas Holiday. And although we don't have a decent version of the trailer to show you today, Max, there's a vital connection in this film to a Netflix movie currently getting all kinds of attention and analysis, right?
There is indeed, Gary, and hello, everyone. Netflix has just started airing, after a limited theatrical release, David Fincher's Mank, in which we have Gary Oldman playing Herman J. Mankiewicz, the screenwriter, best known for his work on Citizen Kane, and who just happens to be the screenwriter of Christmas Holiday, which came out 3 years after Kane.
Well, and Mank is controversial. I think I mentioned I was speaking to a mutual friend of ours the other day who was looking askance on Mank, as some people, others have. I think if I have to be for it or against it, I'm for Mank, I guess, just to bring the story of Citizen Kane to people's attention in the kind of detail that maybe it had never been presented before, or at least not for decades. And Mankiewicz himself is a fascinating character, Herman Mankiewicz, brother of Joe.
He is. I mean, it's just, unfortunately, the film Mank is making it harder for people like me who've been trying to save Orson Welles' career for several decades, because it seems like there's this industry designed to belittle Welles and his accomplishments. And one of the issues that, of course, Mank deals with is that, Herman Mankiewicz was the main author of Citizen Kane, and Welles didn't want to give him credit, which unfortunately is fiction. And we can talk, if we have a little time, we can go more into that. But it seems as though Mankiewicz's entire reputation was based on the fact that he is co-credited as a screenwriter on Kane. He has about 90 films that he contributed to as a writer, starting in 1926 until his death in 1953. Aside from Kane and a couple of others, there are not a lot of highly memorable ones.
No, probably Dinner at 8 would be the most well-known at this point.
Dinner at 8 is certainly very interesting. And Christmas Holiday is quite fascinating. And as we talk more about Christmas Holiday, we can see some of the effects Citizen Kane may have had on the narrative, this going back and forward, which, contrary to what the film Mank claims about Mankiewicz, may have been more of Welles's influence on Kane than Mankiewicz. But Mankiewicz certainly may have been influenced by Kane's narrative structure with Christmas Holiday. But we can get back to that.
Well, as many viewers probably noticed, Christmas Holiday is actually based on a novel by Somerset Maugham. Now, Mankiewicz and company relocated the story from pre-World War II Paris to I guess mid or late World War II New Orleans, and it might be interesting. I'm going to just read briefly the synopsis of the book to show you how it diverged. I've got a copy here with me, and on the dust jacket it says, in Christmas Holiday, Mom tells the story of a young man whose brief encounter with a wayward girl in 1939 Paris forces him to question the assumptions on which his own comfortable life has been based. For Lydia, a different name than in the film, The Russian Revolution has displaced her family, left her homeless and fatherless, and for reasons that elude Charlie, same name as in our film, Lydia pines for a man half a world away, a dope dealer and murderer whose sins she seeks to absolve through her own self-destruction. Haunting, erotic, deeply affecting, Somerset Maugham's Christmas Holiday explores two souls capsized by compassion and the confusion that engulfed a young generation in the days between the world wars. So the emotional effect is the same, but the historical and social setting has been completely moved.
Yes, and I'll read, that's very helpful, Gary, and since we don't have access to the trailer, I'll read the Wikipedia description of the film Christmas Holiday, which is, the film is about a woman who marries a Southern aristocrat who inherited his family's streak of violence and instability and soon drags the woman into a life of misery. After he's arrested, the woman runs away from her husband's family, changes her name, finds work as a singer in a New Orleans dive. It's funny in reading that description because we tend to forget about the Southern aristocratic theme that's going on here. And it could be that because the Gene Kelly character as the husband and Gail Sondergaard as the mother, his mother, they don't necessarily play up a Southern persona in their performances. Perhaps these were deliberate artistic choices. And then there's in revisiting the film, because clearly the narrative, Gary, that you shared with us from the Maugham novel would have had a problem being brought to the screen in Hollywood in '44 because of the censorship laws, because she becomes a prostitute. She goes under the name of Princess Olga at the brothel in Paris because she figures men are attracted to, Russian women with royalty in their blood, and all that, of course, was not acceptable. However, and this is classic Hollywood, where from page to screen, the woman transforms from a prostitute into a hostess. And it's suggested here that when Diana Durbin is first introduced, when the soldier is brought to that jazz club, when he's on the layover, it's suggested that, well, she's a singer there, but then there's an older man who hands her a note, and the note is passed to her, and then she hands the note to another woman.
Right.
Is she more than just a hostess? And we have to kind of use our imaginations there.
Well, I think that the one indisputable fact here is that we have a director, Robert Siodmak, who's one of the reigning heroes of film noir in the 40s and early 50s. And the film noir genre, whatever you want to call it, was just getting started in 1944. Double Indemnity came out. That's still one of the classics of the genre. And I guess Siodmak's most famous film perhaps is The Killers with Burt Lancaster, his first film, Ava Gardner, which was a runner-up here at New Plaza for our 1946 film a couple months ago. We Settled on My Darling Clementine. Also, Spiral Staircase, Crisscross, Cry of the City, The File on Thelma Jordan, and a non-noir, which any parents who want to try to introduce their kids to older films, The Crimson Pirate with Brent Lancaster was a big favorite when my son was at the right age to see it, about age 7 or 8. But we digress.
Because he was at the height of his powers in the 1940s. And the year that he makes Christmas Story, it's very important because it's the same year he also directs The Suspect with Charles Laughton, which is a fabulous period noir that he made at Universal,
yes,
which frustratingly is not available in this country.
Too hard to see, probably only on TCM.
Or you have to get the DVD from Spain, literally, and which is what I had to do. And then he also made the same year, he made Phantom Lady, produced by Joan Harrison, which is a terrific noir. And that is going to lead to this new era where he's directing The Strange Affair of Uncle Harry, The Killers, and these wonderful movies you mentioned. Siodmak, interestingly enough, we think of him as a German expat, but he was born in he was born in Tennessee, and actually moved or followed his family to Germany as a child. He was the son of a Jewish banker, and then he is going to remain in Germany up through Hitler. By that time, he has entered the film industry. He worked on the famous short film People on
People
Sunday.
on Sunday.
Billy Wilder, Fred Zinnemann, and everybody started out on that. And then, long story short, he's going to end up in Hollywood.
He apparently got the hell out of Paris just before the occupation as well.
Exactly. And so many scenarios like that. So this year, 1944, is his chance, because he's been, he directed a Maria Montez picture, but he's finding his strength as a director of intrigue and suspense. And his ideology for a narrative was on the opposite of Hitchcock. Hitchcock loved the innocent man wrongly accused of a crime. Siadmak preferred stories of transgressors. He thought that those would be more compelling for audiences.
And he had a terrific collaboration with a cinematographer, Woody Burdell, I think, in this film and several others, almost on the level of John Alton-esque work with shadows and light. And you see some of it in this film, and even more so later on.
There are haunting issues, and Gary, I have to be honest. You threw me with this movie, because when I first saw it, I didn't really know what to make of it, and then I took another look at it, and it's very haunting. It's very offbeat, but it's got some really haunting elements to it, and the structure of the film, it's unusual for a noir, because this is a case where a linear story might have made more sense, where we just start with her meeting the Gene Kelly character, and not even, do you really need that book ending narrative with the young soldier who's on his way to San Francisco to try to get even with his fiance who stabbed him in the back?
At considerable length in the first 20 minutes or so.
Exactly, because we don't get to Kelly until 25 minutes in, and then we go back to the current story, and then we go back to when they first met, and then we go back, and then it dissolves to where he's getting arrested, the Gene Kelly character. But there's a lot of haunting elements here. There's a lot that you don't get the first time, I feel.
Well, I think that there's a very interesting visual essay by Richard Brody in his section in the New Yorker magazine online called The Front Row. He does about a 4-minute kind of visual essay on the film. And the one thing that stuck with me there, it's very well done, but the fact that Christmas for many people is kind of a period of loneliness and despair as well as celebration. And I think we've all experienced probably some thread of that at one time or another in life. And I think that's another reason to kind of counter program a film like this. And then there is that scene we talked about earlier this week, very unusual, running about 5 minutes or so, the Midnight Mass at probably one of New Orleans's, at least in theory, one of New Orleans's larger churches, probably shot on the Universal lot, but that goes on for a surprising length and has, I know from experience, there could be something a little melancholy about the Midnight Mass as well, having attended a few. And I think that comes out in the film.
It struck me as sort of Sternbergian. It kind of reminded me of the Scarlet Empress, the wedding scene that was almost minutes.
Wow.
It's a 5.5 minute scene, and it's a powerful scene, especially when the Deanna Durbin character breaks down in tears, and it's sort of, there is a brief towards the end, just as Kelly, not long before he's going to get arrested or get caught after escaping, where you have the reporter referring to Midnight Mass. She just went to Midnight Mass. She was trying to, because the Kelly character is very jealous, so it does kind of bring a circular narrative there. And
so we have another odd motif of two actors or actress, Gene Kelly and Deanna Durbin, who are today at least primarily known as stars of musicals. So this is another kind of odd.
Well, and you embarrassed me, Gary, because when I was compiling my book and I had a section on film noir and Siadmak, I overlooked Christmas Story. I think it's a film with Gene Kelly and Deanna Durbin. It's obviously a musical. That's how little known the film is, but it's a very deceptive title. And I think the two of them, especially with Kelly, the idea of Gene Kelly playing a murderer, it's not as campy as it sounds. I think he gives us a pretty controlled performance through a lot of the film, and there is a sense of menace there. I would have even liked more of him and a little bit more of that relationship with his mother, Gail Sondergaard, who we can talk more about. But these were definitely stretches for both stars. Diana Durbin, of course, having been an adolescent musical star at Universal from the late 1930s onward, wanting to change her image at the time she made this film.
Only 22 or 23 at the time that she made it, but she'd been in a number of, I guess, what we would call B musicals at this point.
Exactly. And the Hollywood story, and for all we know, this could be just total nonsense, was that she had appeared in a short film with Judy Garland and the Gum Sisters called Every Sunday, and that MGM wanted to sign Diana Durbin, and somebody accidentally signed Judy Garland. I'm not buying that at all. But in any event, Garland goes to MGM, Diana Durbin goes to Universal, and this was her attempt to change. Although I think it's very clever, because she didn't go strictly dramatic here. She did work in some vocal scenes, especially the Irving Berlin song "Always," which is a powerful motif.
Very eclectic selection of music in the film, and we want to thank one of our listeners who just pointed out on the chat line that, in fact, the Midnight Mass was filmed in an actual church. Saint Vibiana, I believe, if I caught it flashing across the screen. So thank you to George, one of our listeners, for that.
That's great.
So yeah, we have a little Beethoven. We have some opera, I think, in there somewhere.
There's Wagner. I mean, Wagner is where she meets the Kelly character. Then they come back and go to another concert for Beethoven, and then at the very end, as she's in tears, Wagner is reprised on the soundtrack. So it is an eclectic use of music.
Yes, another listener just pointed that out as perhaps their favorite musical moment of the film. So. And also a tune that has popped up in many Universal pictures. They must have owned the copyright. Always, I think, co-written by Frank Lesser, right, of Guys and Dolls fame.
Lesser wrote the other song, the song that she sings in the bar. A spring is going to be a little late this year, I think. That was his. Irving Berlin wrote Always, and that was 1925. So, but there must have been an ownership there that enabled them to use it so frequently.
Well, now you mentioned Gail Sondergaard, who plays Gene Kelly's mother. I think an underrated actress, and a very kind of disturbing undercurrent in the film, and the relationship between the mother and the son. I think at one point in her narration, Deanna Durbin's character says that she was later told that the relationship between her husband and his mother was in fact pathological,
yes.
Whatever that might mean. But
well, when you have Gail Sondergaard as your mother, there has to be a pathological relationship. She is a very sinister presence in any film she's in. She's, we think of her as Mrs. Danvers in Rebecca, but of course she wasn't in that part. But she was always kind of the sinister housekeeper, the sinister mother. And she, a very, very underrated actress, she is going to appear, her first film is Anthony Adverse in 1936, which I believe got her some Academy Award attention. Mm-hmm. Her husband is Herbert Bieberman, who is, well, they're both radical leftists who are affiliated with the Communist Party USA. He is going to be one of the Hollywood 10 who is blacklisted and jailed, and will eventually direct Salt of the Earth, which she was supposed to be in. But long story short, she is in films until 1949. That's when she, or shortly thereafter, becomes blacklisted because she refuses to cooperate with the Congressional Committee. And she is going to be denied any kind of film roles for 20 years. So as far as the
longest blacklisting periods, I think.
It's clearly, I think, for a star, one of the longest periods of political unemployment in Hollywood. And she finally comes back in the late 60s. But she's a very, very powerful presence on screen, very unsettling.
Commands this in that scene where the police officer comes looking for Gene Kelly. She said, "Well, I'm his mother. What can I do for you?" or something.
Yeah, and there's that wonderful, when she says that, there's a wonderful profile shot where she's in partial shadow, and I believe Deanna Durbin is behind her. So that points to the cinematographer, and Siad Mek, of course, one of those great angles that appear in the film.
And one of our listeners just pointed out the letter. I assume the Betty Davis version, not the or perhaps the earlier version, both of which I've seen, although not in a long time. It is another one of her standout performances.
That would be the Betty Davis then. Yeah, she had a number of tremendous roles, and Gene Kelly is about 2 years into his MGM contract, so he's a year away from starring in Anchors Away, and once that comes out, there's no way the studio will loan him out again. But this was done as a loan out to Universal, just as the previous year he had been loaned out to Columbia for the Rita Hayworth picture Cover Girl. But this was an unusual film for Kelly. But as we talked about a few days ago, he did some noiry pictures in the late 40s, like
he was in Black Hand, I guess, a mafia film, and what they would, as Martin Scorsese calls them, the Mustache Pete mafia films, that were made in the 40s and 50s, which are not a very realistic depiction, apparently. But,
so that was one of a couple of efforts by Kelly to sort of toughen up his image. So it's a fascinating collection of talent here that normally you wouldn't see working together. But the question remains: does the structure work? And the theory, and then this is what kind of irritated me about the movie Mank, is in the movie, the Mankiewicz character, as he's working on Citizen Kane all by himself, Wells is on the East Coast, right? Mank comes up with this strange narrative structure. And actually, that's not really true, because when the story is that when Mankiewicz saw the finished Citizen Kane film, which went back and forth, he didn't like it. He didn't like that structure and wished Wells had followed a more traditional Hollywood narrative. So yet here we are 3 years later, where he seems to be, if he in fact was responsible for this, because we never know with screenplays, him adapting more of a Kane-like narrative.
And we don't have a voluminous paper trail like we have with Kane, unfortunately.
And that's frustrating, and it's so hard. Which is, maybe you've heard me say it before. Screenwriting can't be taught, because you really do need access to all the studio documentation to find out who contributed what. Was this in the original script or the treatment? Did another writer come in and polish it? Was it the director, the producer? It's very hard to determine. But it's reason to believe Mankiewicz would have, because I believe the Mom novel also has a template like that, where 3/4 of the novel are the flashback, and you have this bookended story.
I got about 60 pages into the novel, and I want to continue, but I got as far as the scene in the brothel, which is very described in great detail by Mom, and obviously would not have made it into the movie, because the young working girls are sitting wearing Turkish attire, including I think everything including turbans, but they are topless, and the jazz band is playing in the background as it is in New Orleans. But that's as far as they could take it.
Had they made it before the production code was enforced, maybe they could have been a little riskier.
Like Cecil B. DeMille, Sign of the Cross, or something. That was,
well, precisely, and towards the end, and it's almost buried, where once again I would have liked a little more, because the Deanna Durbin character. She is claiming that she's almost punishing herself for the Gene Kelly character being found guilty and going to jail, and she's punishing herself by following a very sordid path, which in this case is a little less sordid than what the character in the Mom novel engages in.
Well, the two other leading men in the film, I guess, are kind of footnotes to movie history, I guess, at this point in time. Dean Harrons, I believe, the young man who plays Charlie, who was in a couple of other Mac pictures at the time.
He didn't do much after this. This is the same year as this picture, and this is the I guess the soldier who's wanting to go to San Francisco. The same year, he did appear in Siad Mac's Charles Lawton film, The Suspect, and then he's going to appear in an RKO noir called Crack Up a couple of years later, and then it's all television.
I've seen that. Crack Up is with George Raft, I believe, right?
I think I want to say Pat O'Brien is in that. I know Pat O'Brien is in that.
I may be confusing it with another RKO.
Yeah, all those titles kind of run together for me.
Yes.
And then of course we have the actor playing the director, which is Richard. I'm sorry, playing the reporter. Actually, reporter slash procurer, because the character of Simon Fenimore, when you see him in that initial club scene, he's almost like trying to set up the Deanna Durbin character with men. It's like, what's going on here?
That's an embellishment on the mom character, who is more or less a serious journalist. It has the same name, Simon.
Exactly, and then so that anyway, the actor playing that character is Richard Worf, who is going to become an important studio director in the 1940s. He was one of, I think, as you pointed, many directors who worked on Till the Clouds Roll By at MGM, and he directed Champagne for Caesar, I believe, with Ronald Colman. The Groom Wore Spurs, Luxury Liner, It Happened in Brooklyn, which is an interesting picture. And then he is going to go to television to direct a lot of major series in the 50s and 60s, like Gunsmoke, Rawhide, The Untouchables.
Plenty of work to be done.
Many.
Yeah. Well, we have several of our listeners who are giving us very interesting information about the locations in the film too. So that's
do share.
Hopefully we're going to hear from them later, and we'll go to questions soon. Just to remind everybody about pushing the participant button and the box over on the right hand side of your screen. But what can we say anything with finality, Max, about the whole Mankiewicz-Kane and what we see in this film? We're not going to compare Christmas Holiday to Citizen Kane in any way, other than, to me, watching it, I felt that the toggling back and forth was at least superficially reminiscent of the style of Citizen Kane, to whom we may choose to ascribe it at this point in time. I'd like to ascribe it to both Mankiewicz and Orson Welles, but sometimes that's made difficult for us by this.
Well, since you've raised this ugly issue, Gary, just a brief little backgrounder on the whole Mankiewicz politics. It was really started, I don't know if it officially started, but let's say it was blown out of proportion in 1969 when Pauline Kael wrote a notorious essay for the New Yorker called Raising Cain.
Oh yeah.
Her argument was that Mankiewicz was the true author of the script. And she was basing a lot of her information on producer John Houseman, who, according to one reputable book, had a thing for Welles and it wasn't reciprocated, so he thought it was time for a little payback here. Kael did not bother to get Welles's opinion or version of the events at all, and her view became kind of the standard opinion of Kane that I think did a lot of damage to Welles's reputation. So we also had, and this was repeated in the Simon Callow, one of the volumes of the Orson Welles bio that Simon Callow wrote, in which Mankiewicz was shown as to be the main author. But that is not been shown.
I think that's been debunked by other authors like Robert Carringer and Joe McBride, where there is in this particular case a lot of documentation about the various versions of the script, and a lot of notes in the margins and so forth that show Welles's influence on shaping.
Yeah. I mean, there was give and take there. Mankiewicz was off doing his thing on the script, but there was communication with Welles, and then Welles took over the project. And forgive me if I'm repeating myself, I apologize, but in Mank, they make a big deal that Welles did not want Mank to have credit on the film,
right?
Because contractually he was not obligated to, and he said, "No, I'm going to fight you on it." Actually, in reality, Welles offered Mankiewicz the credit. He was not legally obligated to do it, but he very generously offered him co-credit. And even in later years, didn't try to deny Mankiewicz's input. In fact, he was quoted as saying, "Maybe this was on the Rosebud sled. If it had been my idea, I would have remembered it." Mm-hmm. So he, so I think it's unfortunate that the film, the Fincher film, chose to kind of just bring back a lot of these myths about the writing.
Yeah, he tries to hedge his bets a little bit with the controversy, but
yeah. But it's a film obviously worth looking at. It's fascinating, and Mankiewicz is an intriguing figure and an interesting history.
One of the things we wanted to get people's take on also was how many. I think we have a little poll set up here about how many people had actually seen or heard of Christmas Holiday before. As I said, it's one of those movies that because of the director Robert Siamak, and I really recommend all those films that we mentioned earlier. Check out his filmography. But
Just
always
filed my
always
ballot.
hard to see, and I'm glad, thanks to YouTube, that it was in a very good version available for us to watch. So
We
I
were
think-
so lucky because so many, as I mentioned, we can't see the suspect, and yet it's great that we were able to see this otherwise completely unknown Robert Siodmak film.
well, thank you, Max, once again. And I think looks like we have a lot of questioners lined up here. From what I can see, there's a lot of stuff flashing on the screen. So let's
Gary,
proceed.
Gary, can you see the poll? I'll read it out to everybody.
I did see it. Yes.
Okay. Do you have okay, so of the people that responded, and thank you for responding, 7% had actually seen the film previously, and 93% actually had not, and 2 of us don't recall. So that may speak volumes about the movie or the people who can't recall, but we'll go there. So thank you. I want to remind everybody that we're going to have a question and answer period. So if you wouldn't mind hitting the participant button on the bottom of your screen and then raise your hand, and we will call people as they do that. And so there were a lot of questions in the chat, so we'd like to see all those people raising their hands so we can get them to ask their questions in front of everybody. So we're going to start with the first person that raised their hand. And so Daniel, would you please start your video?
Yes. Hello, gentlemen.
Hi.
I have a question, I guess, initially for Gary, who is, as you said, 60 pages into the novel. As I was watching this the other evening, my jaw was dropping at how much of the movie the plot just simply stopped. The characters were eliminated virtually, and we had these big musical productions. And I thought, was this really based on a novel, or were they padding a short story? Do you have any thoughts on this as you're reading the book?
Well, the novel is about 315 pages, and there is definitely a musical band in the bordello, which is called Serail, S-E-R-A-I-L. I'm not sure what that means. Mary Ann can advise us. But it's there to a lesser degree, certainly, in what I've read so far, as opposed to, as you say, these 3 or 4 musical numbers performed almost in total, if I'm remembering correctly, right?
It seems to run about, at least a quarter to a third of the film. The characters are just abandoned, and we're sort of strapped into our seats watching a midnight mass of all things. I just found it puzzling, as I frequently do with these aberrations. I have one other comment, which is on the trivial side, but maybe not so much. I, like all of us, have seen Gene Kelly hundreds of times, and this is the first time that I was actually aware of the scar on his left cheek. Now, maybe this is just my oversight over the decades, but I thought, no, wait a minute. Maybe for this rather unwholesome character, they wanted to light him in such a way that the scar was more visible, as opposed to his wholesome characters that he played most of the time. Just commenting on that, nothing too terribly profound.
I was going back and looking at some of his scenes before we started, and he's got that kind of satanic smile that he uses a lot in the film, and I did notice that little scar.
Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating that the smile takes on a different meaning here than it does in the musicals.
Yes.
It definitely has a lot more of a sinister thing. And Daniel, the thing about the music, it wasn't uncommon in noirs of this era to always have a scene in a nightclub where someone sings. But you're right, there is a lot more singing that goes on, and there is that weird, that bookended narrative.
Yes.
Where it's at least 15 minutes between that takes place before we go back to the flashback again to pick up on the Kelly story. So there was a case where they were dropping the focus.
They really derailed the story. But one other a quick reference is there is a marvelous jazz performance in Phantom Lady, which you would remember. I think, oh
Drummer.
God,
Involving
Elisha
drummer.
Cook Jr. Elisha Cook Jr. is going through this insane drum solo, which is designed to show us how insane the jazz world was. And that's where all the druggies and everybody were hanging out. But so Siadmak had a leaning towards using music in those dramatic ways.
Well, we're getting amazing feedback today from our listeners, and among the many comments, Daniel, that have come across here since we started speaking, apparently pointing out that in throughout the rest of the book there is a number of musical performances at least described, maybe not at the same relative length. And Sarai means harem, by the way, which is
Of course.
Great.
Okay, gentlemen.
Thanks, Daniel, as usual.
All right.
And
Bye-bye.
I also want to add that Siadmak also uses music very well in Crisscross. There's like a bar with a salsa band or a Latino band. There's a great dance sequence and music performance.
That's right, where you see Tony Curtis as an extra flashing across the screen for the first
I'll
time.
look for that.
Maybe his first screen appearance.
So, Marjorie, would you please start your video? And unmute yourself as well.
Okay. I found this movie to be just so overly simplistic, and in many parts it just didn't make any sense to me. I don't understand when he gets engaged to her why he brings her to that joint where he meets all of his bookie friends. He's determined to give it up, so why does he bring her there? It served no purpose. I don't understand why this mother, when she meets her, gets her aside and says, "You're the one that can help him." She was very naive, very simple girl, have no idea why the mother thought that. I was really impressed with Gene Kelly's acting, especially at the end where he really shows his true colors. But I did. And the clouds parting at the end is symbolism 101. So I did. I just
Not
found
uncommon in those days.
Yeah, that's right. It wasn't. But just to me, it just did not hang together for those reasons. Any comments that could clarify that for me?
I'm looking at some of the dialogue, because that's the idea of was the character of the mother very contradictory, where she says, yeah, you're the only one who can save him. And then later she says, all you gave him back was his own weakness, and and then the mother says that only she, and not the Deanna Durbin character, can love him because she forgives all that's wrong with him. So,
but at the beginning she says, "You're the one who can help him." Why? This was a naive, sweet little girl. It didn't hang together for those reasons. But of course she didn't. So the mother doesn't want to accept any kind of blame, so she blames it on the wife. And yeah, it did not hang. Didn't hang together for me.
it seems like that there was room. Let's just say there was room there for expansion on the character's motivations. I think they could.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, taking her to the gambling den or whatever to meet his buddies, that didn't surprise me, just because of his general contradictory, psychopathic nature. The mother thing is more inconsistent.
And also, it could point to his manipulative nature, where he's saying, "Hey, this is a place where I did all my unsavory gambling, but it's in the past now, baby. And here's some of my buddies, but that's no longer part of my life." And that's just a way to throw her off.
No.
Theory.
Thanks, Marjorie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask Laura, please start your video and unmute yourself.
Hi. I had a question around the fact that Gene Kelly's father was not present at all in the movie, and they never, at least I didn't catch them mentioning that at all. And I was wondering, does anyone think that has, I guess I'm interested to hear in the book, is that touched upon, and what was the point of that? I mean, I guess if there were a father in the picture, maybe the mother's role couldn't have been the kind of extremely strong character it was.
I don't recall, Gary, them even.
I'm not recalling any mention of the father either.
Yeah, he's this phantom that's not mentioned or acknowledged at all. And
I think there's
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
some reference to the fact that the family had, several generations of success and wealth and so forth, and that the Gene Kelly character has been groomed for that, but he's disastrously unfit, as we see.
It's strange because they seem to underplay the Southern aristocracy part of his character, where you would expect a father figure to be there, or at least a portrait on the wall of his father, or some reference to the father, and you're not following in your father's footsteps. Like where were all those lines? They were missing. They were missing. It's an absence. I agree.
It's only really when there's that shot when they first enter the mansion or house or whatever it is that you get some sense of Southern, antebellum history or whatever, but that's not followed up on.
But it's a good observation though. He's just the father was definitely conspicuously with his absence in the narrative.
Thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you.
Joan, would you please start your video and unmute yourself?
There. I sort of agree with what Marjorie was saying. I didn't find the movie simplistic exactly, but I found it unpleasant. I didn't like any of the characters, maybe the soldier a little bit, but I know Gene Kelly. I'd seen him in one or two other non-musicals. I didn't find him very convincing in this. And I don't think I did. I think it was, what was it, the Clarence Darrow film he made? I didn't like him in that non-musical either. I don't think he comes across terribly convincing to me when he's not singing. That was just my reaction. The characters in this movie generally, I just found them unlikable. I didn't find Diana Durbin pretty enough or compelling enough. So it left me unmoved. But,
well, welcome to the world of film noir. The characters are often not the kind of people you want to hang out with.
I do. I love film noir. And I don't care if the characters are unlikable, but this film itself.
Well, I think the
didn't feel noirish. It just felt they weren't. I didn't care enough about them. Some film noir characters, however bad they are great fun to watch. This movie to me was not fun. Not simplistic, not necessarily, but I just wasn't convinced by it. And
Joan, imagine, I'm sorry, Gary. Joan, imagine my disappointment when I thought this was a wonderful family story. So I was much more disappointed than you were, I think. But, thanks for your comments. I appreciate it. Let's go on to Nancy. Nancy, would you please start your video? And unmute yourself.
Oh, hi. Start my video. Okay, there you go. I'm afraid. Hi. I don't understand the appeal of Diana Durbin. I know she was a major film star, and I didn't think she was enough of anything. What was her appeal? She certainly was no beauty.
Well, this is a tough crowd today.
Yeah. Also, I thought she was a little on the flat side when she was acting. I thought she was a little flat.
It's the thing, and I was watching it and taking a look at it again. It's what I found unusual is that when we first see her in that bar where she gets up and sings that Frank Lesser song, it's almost like they throw away her entrance. It isn't a grand entrance on screen. You see this young woman get up and begin to sing, and they cut away to other people, and you see her, and there's not a lot of energy in her appearance.
No.
Her singing. Is that deliberate? That I can't imagine that it wasn't deliberate. And I'm because it certainly, I think she starts to build. I think as the film unfolds and unreels, she becomes a little bit more confident in the
Right.
interpretation.
That scene in the all-night coffee shop, I think that's
Yeah.
a good scene within the.
Yeah, and because in the beginning there's a lot of reticence and there's a lot of flatness in her appearance. I would argue that when she's narrating some of the action, her narration is not a really strong kind of noirish narration. But I do see there's a little bit more confidence that she's getting as the narrative is, as the film is going. I'm wondering why there was such a low energy in the beginning.
Well, she was a major star. She was a major star. Yeah, and I didn't think she was. She's not beautiful by any stretch of the imagination, but I guess she had a good singing voice. I don't know.
Well, the public didn't always go for conventional screen personalities.
Obviously,
June Allison was popular for a while, and it's just. But she was just this major appeal during the late 30s.
And there was a series of these young child actresses, Judy Garland, Shirley Temple, at the end, who were making the transition to adulthood at that point. And I guess the studios were trying to make that happen with varying degrees of success, as we've seen.
I mean, Garland is one of the few who survived that transition because it was brutal for the other child stars. The public is very fickle, and they didn't want to see them grow up. And although this film in particular did well in 1944, but the following year she's going to do another film noir, I think Lady on a Train, which I'm not sure was as successful. But she's going to choose retirement 5 years later because it's hard for her to make that transition beyond being a child star.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Appreciate your question.
Thank you.
Guys, we have 6 more questions. So I'm going to ask Benita to please start your video and unmute yourself.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, personally, I like the movie, but that's not why I have a question. Sorry, it's so dark in here.
It's appropriate. It's a film noir film. It should be dark.
That's right.
All I wanted to know, very objective question, is the concert hall, about 48 minutes into the film, where it was, and what's the name of it, if you know that.
Because that is an actual theater. It's clearly not a special effects scene. I know some people were commenting on locations.
Talking about the Beethoven concert scene. I think somebody pointed out that's in Los Angeles. Maybe that'll come back up on the screen.
Was that the Clune? Somebody said Clune's Auditorium, or the Clunes?
Yeah, somebody mentioned that, but I don't remember. I took a look at the website. I don't remember those loges kind of sticking out. It didn't seem like that was there at the time, but maybe.
But that is unusual to see an actual full-fledged theater.
Yeah, it was a beautiful theater.
Because usually there's an orchestra section, and then there's a painted map of the balcony. But this was not that.
Right. So you think that's what it was?
It was a real theater, but I can't say for certain, except someone did mention Clunes.
Okay. Formula, and I don't know, I just kind of like that. I like the black and white.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. So we're going to ask Linda R. Please start your video and unmute yourself. Linda, would you start your video?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I want to adjust myself to the question of why the mother said you can help him. When a mother has a bad boy, a grown-up bad boy, and nothing can be done with him, she is praying that a nice girl will come along that he will love. So I think the missing piece about why she could help him was that he loved her. So maybe for that, he would change. I think maybe that was what the mother was behind her saying that. As far as Deanna not being pretty, I didn't notice that she wasn't pretty. I thought she had a very nice profile. I was admiring her profile. I think that what was missing in the film for me is why she fell for her husband. I mean, she just kept going. Oh, I loved him. Why? What was it? You know, that to me, there were pieces missing here. And it was kind of like, it reminded me of a rough draft that maybe the script wasn't ready to shoot. That's the feeling I got. But I still liked it. It was nice and dark and noir-y, and I still liked it. Imperfect, but I liked it. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. So we have, maybe for another evening, we have a conversation about why did she need to be pretty? Maybe a double standard going on, but
We have a lot of Deanna Durbin fans out there though tonight on the chat.
Well, the
right.
thing is, in certain angles, you know, maybe she wasn't photographed that flatteringly, and then in other angles, her prettiness definitely emerged. I thought. I think she had an unusual face at that age for the camera. But
Yeah. So we're going to ask Joyce to please join us, and there you go.
hello,
Hi
Joy.
there. So first of all, what surprised me about this movie is that I was all vested in this poor soldier whose fiance ran off with somebody else, and I still don't know what happened. I don't know if he got to San Francisco. I don't know, if he was able to requite his love. So that shocked me. But then it was like 1940s. Maybe they wanted to throw something in with the war. I wasn't sure about that. That's the one thing I go, I know I read that Gene Kelly was in this movie, and where was he? It's like 25 minutes into the movie before he shows up.
That's
So
right.
to answer some people, the low energy, I think they definitely represented her with low energy because she was depressed. She lost the love of her life, and her mother-in-law made her feel like it was her fault. So I think that was a total setup to make her be, oh, so sad and so, lost. And as far as Gene Kelly, let's face it, folks, that's just called chemistry. I would take 2 looks at him and fall madly in love with him also, if I was a young girl like her. But I thank you so much for the conversation and the discussion, because it was really my first film noir that I watched. But can you tell me what happened to the fiance? Did the soldier ever get his girl?
I think she decides that she is going to just kind of he's going to just toss that off. He's not going to go to San Francisco.
Is it in the book?
Well, I think it's in the film. I think towards the end, he's talking to somebody, maybe at the hotel desk, or there's a conversation about that towards the end of the film before the climax, and he's going back to his military base.
He's not going to go to San Francisco.
It's definitely, and Joyce, you bring up a good point. It's a red herring, because like you at the beginning of the film, I figured this was going to be the soldier's story, that he was going to go back to, and maybe Gene Kelly was the guy that his fiance was marrying, and that's
exactly what went through my mind. Exactly.
So it was fascinating that they kind of let us, they kind of deceived us there. And also, which Gary and I didn't get to, is that what was fascinating and unusual is that the murder that Kelly's character committed is off camera. We don't see him actually.
Right.
You don't know why or who it was or why he.
I mean, there's blood on the trousers,
yes.
but other than that, we don't see the crime being committed.
And he said to her at one point in time that I come from a family with problems. Mm-hmm. So that might be alluding to his father, because someone else had asked that question. But thank you so much for the conversation. It was really wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Joyce. We have 2 more questions. Our next question is from Martha. Martha, if you would start your video, please, and unmute yourself.
There we are. My video's not showing for some
reason. We hear you.
What?
We can hear you. That's good.
This is good. Several things. I thought that there were intertwining themes of people falling madly in love, not necessarily for any good reason, and believing in this sort of redemptive power of love. And you have it with both the two main characters, and the mother may have had that sort of belief also. My sense was that the father was a failure, if not worse. I just had that feeling all the way through, and that she and her son were trying to find a way to straighten him out. And that's why her approving of the girlfriend was so important. And I thought she said something to him when they were talking about her that indicated that the two of them sort of had an understanding about her. And that made his trip to the gambling table, to me, it was, I'm saying goodbye to this. I'm showing you I'm saying goodbye to this. My marriage is sort of a commitment to straightening out my life. And I, yeah, I had the same thought about the soldier. He caught on, and the Diana Durbin character didn't catch on and was still just swept away with belief in love. So that was basically it. And I thank you.
Thank you for that observation.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't look bright
Thanks,
for
Natalie.
the Durbin character at the end, that's for sure.
I think something that comes across both in the film and the mom novel is that in this particular point in time, it's, the world in total turmoil and turbulence, that one would grasp very fiercely at the prospect of love or a transformative emotional event in life, like these characters did, sometimes successfully and sometimes disastrously.
Natalie, you get the last word.
Wow. I really would love for you to talk about the cinematography. It's one of the things that really kept me riveted in this movie. The lighting was stupendous. The composition of, things within the frame, even in the little rooms in Vermont and certainly in the concert halls, and the sweep of all those wide shots. It was just stupendous. You have anything to say about it?
I remember there's some great camera movements there. There's that very elaborate New Orleans. Gary, is it a bar or a restaurant where I know the camera is craning up and following them as they're sitting down at a table and then craning down the stairs, and there's that elaborate end of the.
I think it is a restaurant.
It is a restaurant, and then you do have these very powerful stationary shots. The composition you're talking about. Obviously, the scene in the midnight mass. This, as I said, it reminded me of a Sternberg, very much almost expressionist uses of shadow.
We mentioned, Natalie, the collaboration between Robert Siodmak and this cinematographer, Woody Burdell. It almost reminds me a little bit of John Alton's work, and some of his best collaborations from that period as well. It's really first-rate stuff.
Because then 2 years later is they collaborate on The Killers, which also has some extraordinary lighting and camera work in it. It's just, it's funny. It's that the studios didn't take these pictures just to fill the theaters, but the people making them, the craftspeople, took them very seriously. And the cinematographers, they were very serious about the lighting, and the directors as well. They took great pride in what they could do within limited means, with shadow and smoke and fog and things of that nature, which is what in this greatest style emerged as a result of that.
I think Siodmak in this period from like 1944 to 1950, he really runs a close second to Hitchcock.
Easily. He and Fritz Lang, and they're both in that same camp, I think. And Siodmak, after leaving Hollywood and he went back to Germany, I would love to see more of his German films, but I know he was kind of going back a little bit to the genre pictures, but we don't get a chance to see a lot of those that he made in the 50s.
Right.
But anyway, beautiful looking movie.
Great. Thank you very much, Natalie.
Thank you.
That was our last question, gentlemen.
Okay, well, we had a lot of new people on screen today, which is great to see. We had a terrific turnout for this film, and I'm really gratified that we called attention to a movie that was hard to see, not many people had seen. It may not completely stand up to rigorous analysis as we saw, but it was really a pleasure for Max and I. Now, Sean is going to tell us about a special program that we're doing on December 30th, in which we're going to show a film which I think, despite what one may think about the director who just turned 90 earlier this month, this particular film is one of his indisputable classics. Sean, what else do we need to know?
Yeah, so thank you again, guys. It was great. I love all the new people, all the new comments. It's always fun to get the different viewpoints, and it's fun for all of us out here to watch the chat and comments going on. The movie that we're going to show, it's going to be December 30th, so it's a Wednesday evening. We're going to do this at 6:30. It's close to the end of the year, so it's going to be our end of the year celebration, if you will. The movie is Breathless. It's Jean-Luc Godard's film from 1960. Obviously a very highly rated film, and one that I think is worthy of discussion by this group as well. But we're gonna have some surprises for you. We're gonna toast a little bit to the new year, ring out this year a little bit. And so we hope that you can join us and see it as a little bit of a holiday celebration as well. And thanks for this year. So far, you guys, you've just been great in helping all of us have something fun and interesting to do and keep our brains working.